Right. Welcome everybody to the Sisters in Crime Heart of Texas chapter's August meeting. We're very happy to have you all with us. I'm the president. My name's Noreen Cedeno, and I'm going to start us off with a little bit of news and announcements. So to start, we have news. 3 of our members have been listed as finalists for the Silver Falchion Award. KP Gresham, Laura Oles, and Manning Wolf are all finalists, and we'll wait to see who gets the final award in the end, and we'll announce that then. If you have news like that, please send it to me. We'll put it on our Twitter, we'll put it on our Facebook, we'll put it in our newsletter. So send me news. I'm happy to have it. I'm happy to help you share it. More news. The Pflugerville Library contacted us and asked for some of our published authors to do some panels for them, and we had 9 volunteers. So we're going to do 3 panels, one in September, one in October, and one in November. When those are released, we'll put that out in the newsletter and on Facebook and Twitter, so you can all go watch the panels. Let's see, what do we have next? As you all know, the Texas Book Festival will not be held as usual this year, so we can't have a table at it, which makes me very sad. But they will still have online events for you to go and see and view. But we won't have a table because there are no tables, which maybe next year, here's hoping. Elections are coming up in November. Please think about volunteering to be on the board. We need new blood, we need help. People for programming, social media, vice president, secretary, treasurer, president. Please volunteer. Let's see. Oh, and next we have our programming chair and vice president, KP Gresham. She's going to tell you about our upcoming meetings. So KP, take it.
Okay, Maureen, if you could hit up the PowerPoint, that would be awesome.
Okay, let's see.
We are so excited about what we have coming up for the rest of the year. We're gonna start with the marvelous Miss Tex Thompson. She is just a hoot. Author extraordinaire. I like it when she says egregiously enthusiastic speaker. That makes it fun. She is going to be talking about how to really wring our characters out for the most that they can possibly give us. Next slide. Basically, she's saying, I'm going to get me off the screen so I don't. Yeah. Okay. The next slide, sweetie.
That one? Or that one? Is that it?
I think we skipped through one. Scoot back just a little.
There we go.
There we go. That's the one I want. There's like 6 or 7 basic stories that you can say exist, but you have gazillions of characters. And so she's going to talk to us about how to get that story that characters will, readers will remember, characters they'll never forget. Bring your enthusiasm and your questions. Okay, on to Bill now. Sorry about that. Again, that's next month. On to the next one. Bill is a licensed professional counselor and author. We've had him speak to us before, which is, he's backed by request of the membership. This time he's going to be talking about beyond good guys and bad guys, using real life motivations in our writing. Next slide. Everybody has a reason for doing something. And we're going to explore what motivates people to engage the world, take risks, be cruel or kind, and keep going in the face of danger. Okay, so again, next slide, that's going to be the October meeting. Then we're going to end up in November before our Christmas party of December with Angie Maddox, and boy, does this girl have stories to tell. She's a private investigator. She was actually originally in California, so she's got all kinds of good stories to tell about there. She currently is the owner of She Spies Private Eye, Inc., written some great books, And that one will keep you on the edge of your seat. So I hope you can join us for these 3 upcoming programs. And of course, in December, we have our Christmas party. So we got lots going. Don't miss out. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Kathy. And for today, we have the wonderful Lori Rader Day, who is an Edgar Award nominated and Anthony and Mary Higgins Clark Award winning author. She lives in Chicago, where she's the co-chair of the Mystery Readers Conference Murder and Mayhem in Chicago, and she is the national president of Sisters in Crime. Please welcome her, Lori Rader Day.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Pleasure. Now, somebody remind me, Heart of Texas. What exactly is the Heart of Texas? What are the parameters there?
Pretty much anything between Waco and San Antonio.
Okay.
We're based in Austin, but we
Okay.
have members who are north of there, way north of there, and members who are as far south as San Antonio.
Okay.
And then east-west, we have people out coming in too. So
Okay.
it's a multi-county area.
Nice. Well, I've been to Austin, so I can honestly say that I love Austin. I got to talk at Book People once, and I really wanted to visit the Austin City Limits, but I did not get my act together to get access to it in any way. So I went and bought a t-shirt across the street, and it's one of my favorite t-shirts, but someday I'm going to get back and go to Austin City Limits and see a show. So when I do, I'll make sure that I visit some sisters while I'm down there. I won't be the national president by then, probably, because that's over in about 2 months, but new friends. So I said I would have a book talk today to talk about my latest book. But I'm also open to any questions any of you have about writing, revising, publishing, promoting, any of that. So let me get through the essential bits about this new book. And then let's just talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. We can also talk about sisters if you're interested in what's happening at the national level. So my latest book is The Lucky One. Pretty. It is a psychological suspense novel. The gray areas of the subgenre that nobody actually fully understands. This story started for me because I live in Chicago. Our houses are very close together in the area where I live. So I'm actually in Chicago. It looks very suburban if I turn the camera that way, but it's about 9 miles from city center and still Chicago. But the houses are very close together. On that side, there's a house that the guy there thinks he's an opera singer, and I can hear him doing that when all our windows are closed. I can hear him singing in the toilet next door with all the windows and doors closed. He's not bad, actually, but on the other side, the house next door had a family in it, had lived there for, I'm serious, 50 years. And then finally it was just down to the son, and he sold it to a developer who noisily redid the entire house over one long stretch when I was trying to write a book next door. So I kind of hated the developer the whole time. But then one day, magically, they're gone, and a sweet little family is living next door. And the very first time I met them was in the backyard. So remember, the houses are very close together. On the side with the opera singer, it's a tall privacy fence. But on the side with the new family, they didn't change the fence out. So it's a low chain link fence, a very ugly fence. It's been there probably longer than anything else in this neighborhood, including the trees. I hate it, but it's their fence. But it also means that when I'm in my backyard and they're in their backyard, you cannot pretend that the other person is not there, right? It's just like, hi. You're talking to them whether you like it or not. Luckily, they're a lovely family. So the first time I met the mother and the little girl, who's about 2, in the backyard, were sort of like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And she introduced herself and said, and this is my daughter, Eden. And I said, oh, wow, I don't usually tell people right off what I do for a living, writing dark stories. Not everybody can take it. but I just turned in my latest book, and the name of the protagonist is Eden. And I need you to know that I did not name that character after your daughter. We're meeting for the first time. Your daughter is now the only Eden I know. I don't usually use names of people that I know for the protagonist anyway. And and the mother was like, "Yay!" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't think you're gonna think so, if you pick up that book." But okay, delightful family. A few weeks later, we were in the backyard again, and of course, hello. And we talked a little bit, and we're kind of leaning on this ugly fence. And I said, "I hate this fence. Just so you know, this is your fence. But we were thinking about getting our own fence, and it would just be up against yours, but then it was going to trap grass in between. And if you also hate this fence, if we buy a fence, maybe we could have it pulled up, right? And so we both just have our fence, and you don't have the ugly one with all the grass trapped." And she was like, "Oh, I love that idea. I hate this fence too, but not because it's ugly. I'm actually concerned," she said to me, "that someone's going to lean over the fence and grab Eden." And you all of you, every single one of you went, "Whoa." Yes, exactly. So over the fence, we're talking, and I'm like, I'm the worst case scenario person in any relationship I have ever had. And I never thought of that. I guess it's because I don't have kids. And she said, no, it's not because of that. It's because I was kidnapped as a child. Right. So I went, "Stop. Okay, you just became the protagonist of my next book. Is that okay?" And she was like, "Yay!" And I'm like, "No, I don't think you're going to think so. But maybe." Okay, so we've gotten to be friends, actually, really good friends. But her story, very briefly, is that she was at daycare. It was a cheap daycare. Her parents were very young when they had her in North Carolina. And so they were both at work. She's at daycare with too many kids, probably, for how many adults were there in the backyard. Someone from the neighborhood reached over the fence and took her to go give her a cookie. So that's, she went to this woman's house, and the woman put her on the front porch to go get the cookie. The woman's dogs discovered her on the porch and bit her. So now she's 2 years old, crying, bloody, and the woman takes her not back to the daycare, but to the nearest Walmart parking lot and leaves her. 2 years old. So someone there, this is a small town in North Carolina, someone saw her and was like, "Isn't that so-and-so's kid? Where are they? Why are they not here?" So she was fine. She was back home within a couple of hours, and just has like this story. But that's the part that was interesting to me. It wasn't really the kidnapping or the crime or, what was real and what I could make out of that. It was more like this normal, sweet mother of two now, almost suburban Chicago, just the sweetest, nicest girl, except if you mention the fence, her first thought isn't, "It's ugly," it's, "Someone could snatch my kid." She's got like a little ism now. She's very super protective of her children. And there was something in that I really like, it just sparked my imagination immediately. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I wanted to write about someone like that. And I had also been sort of shopping around for my next book idea. I don't know how many of you are published and how many books you are into this, but for me, it's sort of, you finish one book and then you've got some follow-up stuff to do. You've got some revisions and some copy edits and proofreading, and oh my God, you have to read it again as it's in production, but you have to start thinking, well, what do I want to spend the next year on, pretty quickly, almost too quickly, in my opinion. So I had been sort of shopping around for my next idea, and the thing I had been spending a little time on was the concept of this online amateur sleuth community that really does exist. So we write about amateur sleuths all the time, or you read traditional or cozy mysteries, or there are all kinds of amateur sleuths out there, but there actually are people who are amateur sleuths, and it's usually an online situation because it's mostly research in the archives and digging for information that way. So there's a website called the Doe Network. This is the actual website that I was sort of shopping around on, not to write about any individual person, but just there was something to this online amateur sleuth community that I wanted to understand, and I was just kind of like letting myself be near it. I had written an article about Todd Matthews, who is one of the founders of the Doe Network and also one of the founding directors of NamUs, the national database for the missing and unidentified. He's worked with both. And the article was about his 30-year cold case solve, a case called Tent Girl. So if you want to read about Todd Matthews, just Google Tent Girl, like camping tent. It was a body that was found by someone a generation older than Todd, who Todd ended up marrying this guy's daughter, and then took the case over from him, and then worked on it for 10 years himself. So the father-in-law worked on it for 20 years and couldn't solve it, and then Todd took it over and worked on it for about 10 years himself, matching an unidentified body that has been found to a missing persons report. And so then he started the Doe Network, and that's what they do. They have the missing people, and then they have the unidentified bodies. And what they're trying to do is connect somehow tiny little pieces of information that might lead to a match and closure for a family after decades sometimes. So that was the story that I had just read, and I was sort of interested in this community. And while I was looking on that website, so you can sort all the records of, all the missing people who are known, still missing, by date. You can look at, see what's the oldest case that's in the Doe Network. It's really old. It was a guy, a lawyer who worked with Billy the Kid. He went missing. He's never been found. Obviously, he's very dead. He will never be found alive. This is not going to be a miracle story. But if bones are ever found, they might be able to match them. And that's why they leave these people up on the site long after they might be found alive. So I was sorting by date and looking to see what I found. And then I sorted by geography and scrolled down to Indiana, which is where I'm from originally. So it was just the women from Indiana that had gone missing and had never been found. And a face on that site was familiar to me. And this is a girl that had gone missing from my childhood neighborhood when I was a kid. She was actually 4 years older than I was, and I should not have known her. If you remember anything about elementary school, 4 years is a pretty big gap. But I did know her because we rode the same school bus to school. And at some point, she sat next to me on the bus, and we talked about my birthday party. I was going to have a birthday party that weekend, and she was kind of bossy about it, actually, saying that I needed colors picked out. I needed, a list of things that I needed purchased to have this party. And I remember thinking, what's it to you? Like, what's the big deal here? She's very, she's 4 years older than me. She's telling me what to do. And then when I got on the bus that next Monday, she was like, did you have a pink and green party? Did you have streamer? And I'm like, no, we just had like my cousins over and cake. So high pressure. I found out later that her birthday was a week after mine. And I suspect that it was her birthday party that we were planning instead of mine. But so we weren't friends, but I knew her. I had this relationship with her. She was 12 when she went missing, and I had never lost track of her exactly. I knew she was still missing, but again, the site keeps people up forever until bones might be found. And so I was just surprised to see a face that I recognized, even though I knew that she was missing. Her name is Deborah Jean Cole. She will never be found. She is definitely dead. Her 2 years after she went missing, she was considered a runaway at 12, like a 12-year-old ninja. Apparently they're very good at getting away. No. She had some help. So 2 years after she went missing and was considered a runaway, her older sister was found, raped, and murdered not that far from where I was living, between where I was living and where my grandparents lived. So very, very close by. And so what we had there was not a runaway problem, but a stepfather problem. So he was never brought to justice. He did die, you'll be glad to hear, very, very early. He had a heart attack at 47 or 48, almost like he was very concerned about something. But they were onto him. And if he had lived, they definitely would have found a DNA match eventually. But because he died, they could take his DNA, and when DNA caught up, this is 80s, they were able to match it, and he was indeed the person who raped and probably murdered the older daughter. And so therefore we think probably that the younger daughter was similarly treated, probably had a really crappy childhood, and will never probably be found unless farmers turn up her bones at some point. So, but imagine I'm shopping the site and you see a face that you recognize, and you're like, oh, right, I have a story that I'm not going to write about her, but I'm going to use the feeling that I have when I think about, a girl my age in my neighborhood, 9 houses away, the life she must have led. But so I gave that moment to the main character in The Lucky One. So my character in The Lucky One was kidnapped as a child at the age of 3, much like my neighbor, returned safely the same day, all is well. But she feels like she's the one that got away. She got lucky. She's the lucky one. So she's going to use that energy to volunteer for a website. I call it the Doe Pages in the book. But it's just like the Doe Network. It's volunteers trying to make these matches, right? She's just a low-level volunteer just getting started when she's scrolling through the page and she sees a face that she recognizes, and it's her kidnapper, never brought to justice. So she starts to scratch at the surface of that. His profile is there, and then it's gone. And she's got a lot of questions about who this person was and what's going on. So that's The Lucky One. It also has a second protagonist. It's told 2 protagonists telling the story in third person limited. So a very close third person. And that is a writing choice that I made based on the fact that the 2 women are close in age. And I wasn't sure if I used first person, if the reader would be able to tell them apart very easily. So that's what's new for me for this book. I sometimes say that I try intellectual exercises, but let me just tell you that I'm going to stop saying that, because these intellectual exercises that I give myself have nearly killed me the past few books. They're just, I want to challenge myself to do something new. And then you're like, stop, just write a book, just write a story. The third person limited was different. It was hard, but it was also, it gave me some opportunities to try something different. And because I used a different point of view, I think we're all writers. I don't know, are we all writers or we have readers here? Okay, very briefly, a little shop talk. So my theory on point of view is it's a scale from first person all the way down to third omniscient, right? That God looking down and telling you what all the little people down in the world are doing. And on the first person side, it's urgent. It's an urgent voice. It's very easy for the reader to become that character and then to live that story. So it's kind of like you're just plugged in so instantly. So it's very urgent. If you choose something down here on the omniscient side, or the distant side, if you choose distance, you lose the urgency that you would have down here, right? But you also gain scope. So if you need to tell a story from a distance and show things moving around or move from person to person a great deal, or if you are, it's a very old-fashioned way to tell a story. So if you're trying to tell an old-fashioned, Russian classics kind of story, then you might choose that kind of voice. For this, I would normally start at urgent, because that's readers love, first person, they love it. But I had to choose something a little further down the scale. So giving myself scope meant that I needed to use the scope. And so what I did is I used sort of a Greek chorus of the other volunteers chatting. They have an online community chat. And so some of the conversations that they have as they're helping to solve the crime is happening in this chat room situation. And then also because I'm telling a story with 2 third-person narrators who don't have to tell you anything they don't want to tell you in a first person, you can't cheat like that, right? You can't get away with that. In a third person, they can keep a couple of secrets from you, the reader, and also from each other, which just makes it fun for me. And isn't it all about keeping it fun for us? Because if it's not fun for me, you guys, I will not do it. I cannot write. Wendy's giving me a thumbs up. Thank you, Wendy. All of this writing thing is all about me making myself get to the blank page. And, you know, there's a lot of TV I've never seen. They're killing it on TV right now, you guys. I have like 3 streaming services. I'm here in this house all the time. I could watch, I never watched West Wing. Come on. There are so many things I could spend my time on. Do you see all those books back there? I could be reading. So it's all about keeping things interesting for me, the slacker who could not be at her computer all day. And that's how I do it. I try to do something new with each book. My books are all standalones, so I don't have that same character to, maybe I'll lose, if you have the same character, but you try to keep it fresh, you might lose readers who really liked it the way it was. I think that must be a big challenge to people who write series books. I'm a little scared of it myself. For standalones, I get to start with a whole new character, a whole new setting, a whole new setup. You know, it makes me have to do the work over again. You know, I have to make it different enough from each book that it's not an accidental series, but it does help me keep my interest high. So that's the lucky one. The lucky one was out February 18th. I managed to get about 10 events in, which sounds like a good run, right? But I do all my own promotions still. I'm with HarperCollins, but I do all my own arrangements and all my own events, all my own travel, all that stuff. So I had about 30 things that I was doing, various kinds of events that had to be canceled. That was a bummer. To plan all this stuff and have it like lockstep, you know, the calendar and where I was going and when, and then take it all down again. But, you know, whatever. But what I did with my quarantine is I rewrote my next book entirely. So if you're looking for a way to make your life feel normal again, even though we are all kind of locked away, I recommend having a book that you wrote last year be absolutely terrible and decide to take it down to the studs and build it up again, because that's a very distracting exercise. My what I call academic challenge was to write a historical. So my next book is historical. So that's the lucky one. I would be willing to take any questions on writing, publishing, revising, anything that you guys are interested in. I can tell you while you're getting your questions ready, and you can put them in the chat if you don't want to talk, or you can unmute yourself and ask me a question. That Sisters in Crime National Board is very busy right now. We are working on a new website design for sistersincrime.org, which is way overdue. And while we're doing that, we're working on some things to make it more accessible to people who have hearing difficulties and eyesight difficulties. So some accessibility upgrades, make it mobile friendly, which it is not right now. And then that's all going on while we're also getting ramped up to do some stuff for NaNoWriMo. If any of you have ever done National Novel Writing Month in November, which I always think, why November? Why? That's the worst month to try to write a whole book. But if anybody is trying to get motivated to get, just stack up some words, consider, getting ready for November 1st, because we're going to have some pre-event webinars to talk about getting ready, getting, situated to write 50,000 words in a month, and some articles in the newsletter, that kind of thing, to encourage you. And then lots of online like write-ins where you can check in kind of like this and then hide your face and go to write. Lots of stuff like that. So it should be fun. And you don't have to finish NaNoWriMo to take part in NaNoWriMo. It's just a chance to work together and maybe get a few extra chapters done. Yeah, thumbs up from, okay. What is the situation with publishers taking on new authors in the pandemic situation? That's a great question. I don't know that I can speak for all publishers. I was just talking to another chapter where I think half the chapter was on submission, and everyone was like, oh, well, it's really slow right now. And that is true. Summer is always very slow for publishing. They do summer Fridays. I mean, in normal times, they work 4 days a week, or they do a short day on Friday. So it's just slower generally. Everybody's taking all their vacation. In a pandemic situation, I can imagine that is times 11 true, that things are slow. I think especially submissions over the transom into the slush pile, right? If you're trying to get notice without an agent, I think probably right now is a very slow time for that. So take heart if that's a situation that you're in. Just because there's some silence going on right now doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Just the pandemic, so it might be. But in publishing, not necessarily, right? It just means things are a little slower. I know my editor is working from home. Almost all of them are. And she has been very slow to get back to me on anything. And it's not just me and my agent, everybody. It's just, she's got 2 kids in her house that she has to try to figure out how to entertain. But I do think that a new author is always very exciting. And a project that is exciting, a project that is hitting all the check marks for a certain agent or publisher, editor, is going to get noticed. It might just take a little extra time, but I know that a friend of mine who has 2 books out, her publisher folded, and then she had her new idea kind of getting ready to go. It was a very exciting story. She's an award-winning author. It was just a good moment for her generally, and she just got a new deal. So, it hasn't even been announced yet, but she will be able to announce a new deal probably within a couple of months. And so it's still going on. It's just maybe not as visible as it may have been before, and everybody's working from home, everybody. So, but it's just a chance to step back and take that time for yourself. I was just grumbling to my husband about how I turn in my manuscript, and then 3 weeks later, my editor's like, oh yeah, I'm going to pick that up today. And I'm like, I could have used that 3 weeks. Like those 3 weeks could have been my 3 weeks. Right. So, I mean, think of this time as that time's for me. If it's going to take longer, why not slow down and use that time for me and then send it out 6 weeks from now or whatever it is. The better your manuscript is, I mean, that's the only thing we have control over right now. And I cannot stress enough, that is the only thing that you have control over ever. And that is your job, is to make sure that your manuscript is as good as it can possibly be. My publishing story, you didn't ask, but maybe people like to hear this, is that I wrote from a very young age. I was just the kid that told the story or wrote it down. And then mostly fell away from it sort of accidentally. I wrote off and on, just kind of dabbling. But when I moved to Chicago in 2001, I just kind of stopped. And I didn't mean to. I had always been into writing. When I was in high school, I had a small high school, so don't take this, like it's the Pulitzer or anything, but I won a creative writing contest in my high school as a sophomore, and I beat the senior boy who had been winning every year. By the way, beating a boy that you like in a writing competition is not a great way to get him to like you back. I learned, but in 2001, I had moved to Chicago. My husband and I, we moved in together. We're about to get married, like new job, new city, new situation, everything. And so I just sort of stopped writing accidentally. For about 5 years, I didn't write a single word for myself. I was doing a writing job, really excellent healthcare articles, like really good, but no fiction, no essays, nothing. And then what spurred me to get back to it was that the guy back in high school published a book. Now, he's a friend of mine. He's like my brother at this point, but him publishing his first book made me realize that people from where we were from were able to publish books. Like until that point, I just never thought it could be, like I wanted to write, I wanted to do it, but I didn't realize that I could, that I was allowed. But I had to take a stock of how he had been able to do it and I had not. And the top thing was he had been writing the whole time and I had not. And he had centered his life around writing in a way that I had not. So I decided, well, it's put up or shut up time. So I'm going to give it a shot and see if I can, at least try to center my life around writing a little bit more. So I actually started a Master of Fine Arts program here in Chicago. It's not what you have to do. It's just something that I thought would work for me. And it did, because it gave me an audience and feedback and a chance to give feedback to other writers, which is actually the best way to make your writing better. Is not actually what people tell you about your writing, but what you tell people about their writing, because you're figuring out that, like, why don't I like this? What does this person need to change to make this better for me to like it? And then you're like, oh, I do that too. I need to take my own advice, right? So an audience and deadlines, that's what it gave me. So save yourself the $30,000 and just find a way to get an audience and some deadlines. But it really did help me. I started publishing or writing a lot of short stories, getting better, and getting published, winning a couple of contests. And then one of my short stories got long, and it was like about 40 or 50 pages, which is really long for a short story. And my workshop group, about 17 people sitting around the table, were all like, we want more of this and more of that and more of this character and more backstory and more about her job, more. And I went to my teacher afterward and I'm like, it's already a beast, a monster of 40 or 50 pages. How am I going to get more of all of this stuff in there? And she's like, yeah, Lori, that's called a novel. So keep writing. And I didn't do it right away, but I did eventually finish that novel. At which point, and while I was still stumbling around, just having heard that I was writing a novel, I didn't know I was writing. I got accepted into this weekend retreat. They don't have it anymore. I would highly recommend it. Where when I arrived, they had put the 9 students, divided them into 3 groups, and it was fiction, nonfiction, and mystery. And they had put me in the mystery group. And I had no idea why. I was not a mystery writer. I used to read mysteries when I was a kid, but I hadn't really thought about, most readers don't think about the genre or a subgenre. They just read. They just pick up what they think looks good, right? And I had not really thought about mystery as something that I was writing. And I sort of raised my hand like, I think I might be in the wrong group. And the teacher for the mystery group was Terrence Faraday, who's a fantastic Indianapolis mystery writer. You should check him out. But he of course saw me, a little MFA student, and it was like, oh, you think you're in the wrong group. Okay. Well, I read your 15 pages or whatever it is to help you here today. There's a crime in it. In your first 15 pages, there's a crime. Are you going to solve it? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, it was a short story last week, so now it's a novel. Yeah, okay, yeah, maybe, sure, yeah, yes, I like to solve things. Yes, I think I will solve this crime. And he's like, yeah, that is called a mystery. If you solve it, it's a mystery, right? If you don't solve it, don't keep that over there, because the mystery community is not going to like that. But if you're willing to solve that story, then just consider it. And so, but he helped me so much by showing, just shining a light just a little bit in that direction, because then all of a sudden I realized, oh, okay, so if the story is a mystery story, that means that crime is much more important than I thought it was. And if I just solve it, I'll have some structure to the story, because I don't know how to finish this novel otherwise. So that's what I did. I finished it, and you know what? It was total crap. It was awful. So I put it away in the drawer. Some of you might have the drawer as well. I think it used to be like a physical drawer that people would put typewritten pages into, but mine is just a folder on my laptop called the drawer. And it went into the drawer and it stayed there for about 5 years while I wrote an all new from scratch novel. I had gone back to work full time at this point too. So I'd had a couple of years while I was in my MFA program where I was working for the university, and then I moved to another full-time job. So I wrote a whole new novel and then sent it out to get agents. So for the first time, I have something that's like, okay, this might get me an agent. And the reason, so I said earlier, like that time is so precious. Just use it for yourself. Don't worry about the selling if you're hesitant, because I spent about a year and a half writing that manuscript from scratch, and then an extra year, an entire calendar year, just doing revisions. Like mostly just stuff that I wanted to fix. And then I had maybe 1 or 2 beta readers giving me some thoughts on it. And then just fixing all of that. And then that's when I finally started sending out queries for agents. And I was set up for the long haul. I had a spreadsheet, had done all my research. QueryShark.blogspot.com is how I would suggest that if you haven't written a query letter, read the archives, and you don't have to ask ever again how to write a query letter. That's Query Shark. If you just Google Query Shark, you'll find it. That's an agent named Janet Reed who does that site. And then I had also done all my research for agents, for the ones that I wanted to submit to, on querytracker.com or maybe .net. I'm not sure about that one. But Query Tracker is a site that's like, the first level is free. I think there are other levels that you can pay for, but you can keep track of the agents that you're interested in and learn about how they work, because other people are submitting. I submitted to this person on this date, and then I got a form rejection on this date, or I never heard from them at all. I guess that's a no. You'll learn how they work through the site, and you can decide how you want to prioritize them, or maybe not send it to that person after all, because it sounds like they're a real jerk, that kind of thing. So I had done all this research, and then I sent my letter to 8 agents, and I got a 50% full request rate, 2 rejections, and one I love your book and I want to work with you. So that was in 3 weeks. But I think it was fast at that point because I had spent that full year, right? So if I hadn't spent that full year, if I'd sent out a book that I wasn't as confident in, and that had a shakier foundation, I think it might have taken more time to get an agent to take me on and then help with it. So, so that part went fast. And then my agent sent things out, and I got some rejections from some of the big 5, well, probably all of the big 5. I'm not sure exactly who she sent it to, but eventually a small press called 7th Street Books, the editor was interested, and that's who my first 2 books were published with. I wouldn't recommend them anymore, unfortunately. So you can do your own research there, but they were purchased by another company a couple of years ago, and it's not quite the same, unfortunately. And then, so first book out with agent, I immediately started the next book, wrote that one. That one was also published by 7th Street Books. And then I was trying to figure out how to write. So here's a math problem for you. My first published book, The Black Hour, took a year and a half to write and a year for revisions, 2.5 years. The second book, which is overlapped in there somewhere, took 2 years to write. They were published back to back, 1 year apart. Do you see the math problem that's coming up? Right. So my question at the time was, how do I get another book published? How can I get another book ready to be published 1 year next time, right? So I thought, you know what I thought? I've got a book in the drawer. I've got a book in the drawer. This will be easy. This will be fast. It was not fast. It was not easy. I started with a blank page, and I had the open draft, the messy, crappy one that I had cobbled together that used to be a short story, to the side, and then started writing from scratch. And that did become my 3rd published book the day I died, but it was not under contract. It was just something I was working on. And then it was almost done when HarperCollins reached out to my agent and asked, what does she have available? An editor there had read my second book, Little Pretty Things, and had come, like, read it on vacation, came home from the beach, and was like, what does she have available? So that's how I switched from 7th Street Books, a very small publisher, to HarperCollins, which is a giant publisher. And I think that's a good move. It isn't 100% better. Sometimes a smaller press, you get more individual attention, and I do miss some of that. But obviously, it's better if your checks come in. So, and that's the big difference between the small press and the big one for me. How many books have I published? So the lucky one is my 5th book, and that was out in February. So my 6th book is coming out probably next summer. I'm not sure of a date yet. I don't have a title, but I think we're going to call it Death at Greenway. And if that sounds very Agatha Christie, it's not an accident. So my next book, really quickly, and then I can take more questions if you have them, is it's a historical set in World War II at Agatha Christie's house, Greenway. In World War II, when they were evacuating children out of the Blitz, out of London, there were millions of kids moved, but 10 children were moved privately. Just a couple said, we'll take, this group of kids, we'll take them to safety, to Agatha Christie's house. And that is truth. That actually happened. I discovered it in a book called Agatha Christie's Secret Notebooks, which is by a guy named John Curran, who was someone who was given access to the Agatha Christie family estate archives. And he was helping them catalog everything that was there. And then he learned about how she worked by doing that cataloging, and wrote a book about it. It is simultaneously the most interesting / boring book you've ever encountered. But one night I was reading in bed, and I read the part, it's like a half sentence where it says, the children evacuated to Greenway House. And I sat up in bed, and I'm like, Bedknobs and Broomsticks at Agatha Christie's house. I want to read that book. Where is that book? And I just assumed there would be one, but no, there was not. And I sat on that idea for about 6 years. Nobody else wrote it. I mean, it's been since the World War II. So, I figured if somebody was going to write it, they would have by now. And then I discovered why nobody had done that research to write that book. There were 10 children under the age of 5. 10 children under the age of 5 are not good book characters, you guys. That is nothing to work with. So it almost put me off, but HarperCollins had already bought it, so I had to figure it out. They had 2 hospital nurses that were in, so it was a couple that said, we'll be responsible for these kids. We'll, take care of them. We'll take them down to this house we've rented from Agatha Christie. And then there were 2 hospital nurses that were on the team, that keeping them healthy and making sure that they were cared for, kind of nannies, but like a little bit more medical. And nobody knows a single thing about them. They're lost to history. In fact, everybody in the story is dead now. So I can use their real names, at least I hope so. And the only person the children are the only ones who might still be around. And only one of those children, as far as anybody knows, knows that they were one of those kids and has written about it. She wrote like a list letter to the house saying, this is what I remember about being at Greenway when I was 4. And now she's 83 and we're pen pals on email. She lives in Canada. So I have done a ton of research for that book. It is against my nature to do that kind of research, but it was important to me to get as much fact as I could, use the fact that I had, and then when I ran out of fact, I could use fiction. Noreen has a question. Did you figure out how to speed up writing the next books? No. I am not a fast writer. It's probably, I think there's the pantser and the plotter spectrum also, right? It's also a spectrum. You could be halfway down the middle. But I'm pretty much a pantser in that I don't love the instruction manual. I don't like the researching beforehand. I like to write. I like to get started and then figure out what I need. So I waste a lot of time letting the story rest and letting the story, like inching forward on the story and exploring a little bit. Someone who outlines ahead of time and then can write from their outline, successfully, it probably has a better, chance of being a fast writer than I am. But that's where I get the fun from writing. You remember how it has to be fun for me, or I will not do it, or I'll go watch West Wing finally. It has to be interesting to me. And the thing that I'm interested in is the discovery. I don't know how a book is going to end usually before when I start writing it. In fact, I sometimes don't know what the hell is going on about halfway through, at which point we have a dark night of the soul. It's actually about 3 to 6 weeks where I'm like, I don't know what's happening. The rending of clothing and the pulling out of hair, the crying, so much crying. But the discovery, when something starts to connect, when the words start to lift off the page and you're like, okay, this is going somewhere. That is the only thing that I enjoy about this process. It's otherwise so much more painful than it needs to be, but that's the part I love. And if I wrote in a way that bypassed that, I would not write at all. I would definitely go watch TV. Were there any other questions that I can answer about anything sync or publishing, or is it who here is published? Just wave your hand. Yes. Okay. Yeah, lots of fans. And then the people who are you submitting or still drafting? Planning someday I'll start writing. Okay. All welcome. I'm glad you guys found Sisters in Crime. It's a great organization, and I'm not just saying that as your national president. I actually do truly believe in Sisters in Crime. I've actually also been on the national board of MWA. It's also a great organization. But I think Sisters is, it's better at some things. And I think it's better for people who are still trying to figure out who they are as a writer, still trying to write that first draft or, change tacks after trying something. They want to try something new. I think we've got a lot of resources for people. Do I think Sync is growing, shrinking, or on a good course? So I think we hold pretty steady. We have about 4,000 members right now. That's about on track for where we are at this time of the year, every single year. In another organization, you might be concerned if your organization had the same number of people every year, but we get a lot of, I think we get a lot of people trying it out and finding that they aren't writers, you know what I mean? Like they want to, but they actually are afraid of the actual process. Or something about being surrounded by people who are doing the work when they can't is maybe a little overwhelming or disappointing. But I think we have a good steady community, and the NaNoWriMo thing that I was talking about earlier is one of the ways that we're hoping to meet a new generation of writers to make sure that new people find out about us. It's a little scary to think about the vast number of people that we might get in front of at NaNoWriMo, because we're going to be one of the sponsors. So we might have an influx. We could have double the member numbers if people really are like, yeah, this is where I want to be and I want to be a member. It could be rather crazy, rather fast. But I think it's a great organization, and some of the things that we had set up were really helpful when the pandemic came along. Like we had the webinars in place. We already had 2 events every single month online where anybody can watch them. And I know for a fact that some of the other organizations just did not have that in place. They did not have that figured out. They might be now, they kind of have to. But meanwhile, we're just like, well, we've already got this. We can just make it better. And oh yes, love that different chapters are sharing their virtual meetings and their webinars. I agree. I think it's fantastic. And I will tell you the one thing that we've learned from this that we did not expect to learn is that online virtual content for the chapters is really valuable. Before, I think we thought if it's not in person, people want the in person. That's why they joined a chapter. But a lot of people, even if they join a chapter, can't necessarily make the time commitment to do a chapter meeting once a month. It may be 2 hours away, and they still want to be in the chapter, but it's 2 hours, and that's one way, and then they have to be there, and then it's a full day commitment that they may not have every month. So what we've learned is that a lot of a lot of the chapters are seeing some of their long lost members, people who joined a long time ago and maybe stopped coming or haven't ever come into a meeting, but they're coming to virtual meetings. We have, disabled writers who would, they want to go to things, they just can't. So yeah, it's been a really interesting learning process, which means I think that our chapters, what you might discover is even when we can go back to in person, maybe we don't want to entirely go back to in person. Maybe we want to keep a couple of meetings a year at least virtual, or some kind of extra thing, like the write-in I was talking about, like doing a couple of casual events where people could just connect a little bit. Oh, kitty. I just saw a kitty on this camera. And that kind of stuff, it's so much more valuable. And then I'm a late believer in this stuff. I definitely was dragging my feet, kicking and screaming when it came to virtual meetings. For the board, I actually instituted Zoom. That's how we do our board meetings. So it sounds like I'm an early adapter, but no, you'd be wrong. Right as the lockdown was starting, so the last time I was free to be me was March 9th. I have some health issues that keep me pretty much in my house while this is going on. But 2 weeks after that was the conference that I run here in Chicago, Murder and Mayhem in Chicago. And it became very apparent very quickly that we were going to have to cancel, it was just so sad. We'd done all this work to build it, and then we had to take it all down again. And I was a brat about it. I was just like, mad. And I run it with Dana Kay, the publicist, and she said, well, why don't we take it virtual? And I was like, I don't want to. I don't, And it was just such a brat about it. She was like, well, what if I just do it? I'm like, fine. And then give me 2 days. And then I was like, all right, fine. What do you need me to do? And then we ran it online on Crowdcast. It was one of the first conferences to go fully virtual. And it was really fun. And it was very, I think, reassuring for the people who were there. It was free. So all the people who had meant to be there got to come. They got a refund, and then they got to come for free. And then all the people who were like, oh, I wish I could be there, got to come, and it was free. We had about 1,000 people show up to that event. Normally we can only take 250 before the fire codes are at risk. So I don't know. I think we've figured out something that we didn't know before about virtual events. Let's see, got some questions here. Recently joined the Guppies. The Guppies is a great organization. It's the online chapter, fully online chapter of Sisters. If you're not a member, consider it. It's $12 extra. So, and they do their own online content. They have forums where we don't deal with forums, but they have a lot of really supportive people there. So consider that. Let's see, it's hard for us to get people at the meeting because of the distances to travel. It's a huge problem. I mean, starting a new chapter is a lot of work. So it's actually easier if you can, as a chapter that's kind of taking care of a big area because nobody else wants to start one, if you can have some online content that satisfies that itch, I think you could have way more members very quickly. It might just be getting your chapter information out a little bit wider. Marketing, Facebook stuff. Let's see. Pandemic changed your writing habits. Do I find it hard to focus, or is it business as usual? Hey, Mariella. My writing habits are so bad, you would not want to emulate me in any way. They're terrible. I am the worst. I'm very haphazard. I can have discipline. I have had discipline when I needed it. I wrote my first 2 books during my lunch hours from a very stressful academic administrative job. I worked for the actual devil, you guys. But the lunch hour was my hour. It was an hour that they couldn't take away from me. They tried all the time. But usually, more times than not, I could use my lunch hours. So that's how I wrote that entire first book that got published for the first time, and then the second book as well. After that, I left that job. So I've been writing full time, not because I'm a millionaire, trust me, but because it was hard to juggle everything that was going on. And also, did I mention the actual devil? So my habits are pretty haphazard, but when I'm drafting, I try to do about at least 1,000 a day, maybe 2,000 if if I can pull 1,500 is a really good number for me. And that's pretty aggressive. And it's not every day, but it's more days than not. And then when I'm on revision, what I like to do is to spend a really deep amount of time, because I feel like in revision is where I figure out a lot of things about my work. Remember, I'm pantsing it when I'm drafting, so I've got all kinds of stuff in there that I don't need. So in revision, I do a lot of heavy revision. So I want that deep relationship with the manuscript, and time is the only, like if you wander away after 3 days and then come back to it 2 days later, you have to get that deep relationship again, and it doesn't work as well. So revision for me is where it's at. But business as usual, sort of. So I think I said when lockdown started, I had already turned in my next manuscript, the historical one that I mentioned, and my editor had it, and then she waited all that time, and then gave me, and then we had a phone call about revisions, and her assessment was it just needed to be tightened up. It just needed, the purse strings needed to be tightened a little bit, or the strings needed to be tightened a little bit, and it was almost there. And so I hung up and I looked at my notes and I wandered around the house for probably more days than I should have. And then I'm like, she's wrong. I don't think this is the book I meant to write. So I took it completely apart and rewrote it from scratch, using chunks here and there that I had already written, but I had 2 timelines in the first draft and it only has 1 timeline now. So that's at least a half a book. So, and I did that, and I had that opportunity, and I could do that because of the lockdown. If I had been doing all that traveling that I was supposed to do, I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I don't know if I would have thought about doing that. So hopefully it's a better book because I did that. And since I turned that in again, I'm basically just hanging out waiting for my next round of revisions. I'm not ready to start a new project yet. But I will say, I think I said this earlier, if you can get some writing done, it is the literal best thing to do to make all of this craziness feel like I can handle it. We can get through this. My normal life is when I can write just a little bit, and get that feeling back. It's hard. I know it's hard to get your focus. But some of you probably have kids in the house and homeschooling and jobs that you're supposed to still be doing. It's horrible. There is no easy answer for what we're going through, but if you can get a half an hour to write, you might be able to handle the rest of it too. Let's see. Oh, KP, your message just came to Mariella. You guys are secret messaging each other. Does anybody have another question? I think I'm probably running over. Oh no, we had until 3:30, didn't we? Okay. So we got time for questions. I'm getting a box delivered to my house right now. It might be puppy gifts. Somebody sent me puppy gifts. Tell us stories about the devil. Oh no, I don't want to tell you stories, but she's retired though. She got, what do you call it? Not of her own free will, retired. Oh, revenge, bing, bang. So yeah. And in a pandemic when they can't throw her a goodbye party. So sad. So sad. What are you guys writing? Is anybody, so who is writing a draft right now? Okay. Are you having trouble writing? Okay, you got some ifs, you got some.
I turned on my mic.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just because I'm the one we were talking behind your back.
About how pretty you are.
You're looking at my bookshelves behind me. I know how you work.
No. She'd asked the question about how your writing is it gotten worse, better, or whatever. And I found that my writing was non-existent for like the first 2 months of the pandemic. And then I got really pissed off about something. That's what usually starts me writing something. And all of a sudden I found my release from all this insanity. The story was the release. So I've been doing better at writing this book daily than I've ever done before. I've never done that before. So that's what you asked, what we were writing and how
Yeah.
we're doing that. So that's the answer, and that's what we were talking about.
And you're also proving the point that I'm like, if you can do some writing, it's the thing that you can control, right? If you can get a page, 250 words, it just connects you back to who you really are. And all of this, okay, yes, we're dealing with that. It's scary, it's gross, it's awful, but I'm still me and I can still do this. Something you said reminded me of
I can still kill people.
Absolutely. I was thinking you just reminded me of something I was going to tell you. You triggered a thought and now I can't remember what it is. Oh, well.
Oh, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're
Who
welcome.
else is drafting?
I'm
right now?
writing and I'm hiding from my children to write. It keeps me sane.
Yeah. Right?
Because all of us are trapped in here, and the oldest one's not going back to college and the younger two are not going to high school and middle school. So we're going to be stuck in the house for a long time, and it makes it hard to write, but I find it's my excuse to close the door
Yeah.
and get away from them. And
Yeah.
that'll keep me sane.
Right. You're working. The door has to be closed because this is important. Set some boundaries. I think, if I had kids, I would definitely be hiding from them. They talk about the writer's garret, right? Like, I don't need a garret unless I had kids, and then I would be like, yes, give me a garret right now with locks on the doors, please. Who else is drafting?
I'm kind of distracted with virtual classes. Like, I'm doing a really great Guppy class right now, but then I just got finished with virtual MurderCon, which was the only way I was going to make it there, and it was really quite something.
It's interesting. We have so many opportunities right now to go to things that we wouldn't have been able to go to. So you're like a kid in a candy store. Like, I just signed up to do St. Hilda's, one of the conferences in the UK, which it's kind of an academic crime fiction conference. Believe it or not, we have an academic crime fiction conference in the UK, and I'm probably never going to go. But they're talking about Agatha Christie at it this year, and I'm like, oh, let's talk about Agatha Christie. So I signed up to go to that. Now, do I have time to go to that? I guess. The puppy's going to decide how many hours I get to be at that. I get a new puppy in the house. Luckily, my husband has got her in the other room, or otherwise you'd be seeing the back of my head a lot more than you have been. But I think, Tom, you said you were drafting as well. How's it going? Unmute yourself, hon. I don't know if I can unmute you or not. Sorry, I caught you unaware. There you go.
I'm spending a little time each weekend, maybe an hour or hour and a half, and I'm putting down an adventure I attended 50 years ago.
An adventure. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
With 17,000 miles on a car in 2 months, and I bought the car the day before I left for $50. So you can imagine there were a lot of adventure.
Oil problems, flat tires, all of that.
Lots of problems. Lots of
Okay.
problems down to
Awesome.
Mexico, down to Acapulco, and across to California, and working in the carnival as a barker.
All kinds of skills.
Getting
you picked up.
arrested, having the FBI chase me.
Well, that sounds great. I'll go see that movie for sure. So is anyone, because of the pandemic maybe, are you feeling like, I want to write something different than what I was writing before? Is anyone feeling that way, or maybe taking a new turn or a new series? Yeah, Noreen?
I wrote something pandemic inspired. I'd never written a novella. And so the Black Orchid novella contest that rolls around every year?
Yeah.
And so I wrote a first draft of a novella in probably a month flat
Ooh.
Oh,
with pandemic masks and social distancing and everything in it. And I had no idea I was going to do it before I started it.
Okay.
Wow.
That's very cool. I have a couple of friends. The question is inspired sort of by, do you know Susanna Calkins? She writes historical mysteries. She's here in the Chicagoland area with me, and she and a couple other people actually have sort of said, I think I might want to write something different, you know, not necessarily nicer or sweeter. I mean, that's a direction that I've heard suggested, that because of the pandemic, about how scary everything is, maybe people want a gentler fiction. And I'm like, well, you know, some people do, maybe, but some people don't. Some people want to write about their anger, right, Kathy? Some people, you know, they want to kill some more people than they normally do. Like we're all dealing with it differently. But I think readers also are maybe, they don't necessarily care that it's a pandemic. They'll read a pandemic novella, or they'll read the novella, the pandemic or the outbreak kinds of novels. They watched the crap out of those movies as soon as this was happening, right? So it doesn't really, I don't think it's necessarily a trend that comes from readers so much, but I think we might see a trend from writers thinking, okay, so my day is already very hard. All the things that I have to do during this is, you know, it's a lot. Maybe I want to write something that's different because this is how I'm feeling. I'm interested in that. The historical, let's start calling it Death at Greenway. Not my title, so I'm getting used to it. It was a story that I wanted to tell, right? It might be a different kind of story for me coming out when people might expect things to be a little different, right? But it wasn't inspired by that. It was, you know, 6 years ago, finding that thing in a book and realizing that nobody had written the story. So I'm just kind of interested about how people are taking in all of this and then using it in their work. And I just remember, Kathy, what I was reminded me I wanted to say was that I was revising this book, writing it from the ground up, basically, again. And the pandemic actually sneaked into the book in a way that I did not expect. So it's a historical, it's set in 1941, Agatha Christie's house. But suddenly I understood the Blitz a little better, you know, having to be inside, having to be more careful, the community aspect, the caring for the community by masking your window lights and things like that. It sort of brought history home to me in a little way that I did not expect. So I was able to use some of what I was feeling and thinking, what I was worried about in the book in a way, just did not predict it at all. Couldn't have predicted it because it had, you know, no bearing at all. Yeah, Noreen.
Well, I've noticed my writing has gone very up and down. One of the first things I wrote when we got locked down was very dark, and I don't usually write very dark. I have to be in a very bad mood to be writing very dark. So I think that was entirely all the pandemic fear and just lack of information, and I put it all into that story that came out very dark. And then once I got past that, I read a lot of short stories. So I can go from one very dark to something lighter to the pandemic novella to something else completely very rapidly. But I think you can see me doing this with the pandemic roller coastering through the pattern of the stories.
That's funny. Kathy?
I had two questions, but it's not about writing. It's about Sisters in Crime.
Okay.
They're very different. One is, do y'all have a chapter in Chicago? And the other is, what is your time commitment when you are on the board for Sisters in Crime?
Sure. So yes, we have a chapter, and it's called the Chicagoland chapter, which is, it's not just Chicago, right? It's, I don't think there's another chapter in Illinois. So we might technically be, you know, the chapter for this region. There is a chapter in Wisconsin, and there's a chapter in Michigan, and there's a chapter in Indiana. So, but there's always room for more chapters, right? So Chicagoland, it's a pretty big chapter. It's one of the probably top 5 big chapters in Sisters in Crime. and very active. We have
How many do you think? Or what's your number?
under 200, but somewhere in the 150 range, I would say now. But I will say that actually we were down to about 65 at one point, not that long ago. And I mean, 65 doesn't sound like a small chapter, right? That's actually a good size for any chapter.
Mm.
But for our chapter, which is a big region, and with a lot of writers, it was not a good number. And it was a lot of people who wanted to be long, but they didn't want to run anything, and they didn't want to help out very much. So we had gotten into a very staid place. And there was a military style coup. So it wasn't me. It wasn't. It was someone else who, because she took that on, it was not a very natural position for her. She was not comfortable with it, but she did it and made a big difference. I decided to help her out. So I was coming off of the National Board of NWA and didn't really want to take on something right away, but I helped out for about 1.5 years with the local Sisters chapter. At which point I got a message from Sherry Harris, who I had met on a panel at Left Coast Crime years before with friends. And she said, I'd like to, I don't know how she phrased it, but I want to ask you a question. What's your phone number? And I was like, you're messaging me, just ask. Oh no. She was the national president, or she was about to become the national president of Sisters in Crime. So it's a 3-year commitment. You come in as a vice president, you're vice president for 1 year, and then you become president. That's 1 year. And then you're an immediate past president for 1 year. So you're still on the board and you're just helping guide the new president behind you. And then you take on a couple of projects while you're immediate past president, something for the longevity of Sisters in Crime, some kind of research project or a big project. And then you help run an event called Sink into Great Writing. So Sink into Great Writing is online. We were going to move it online anyway. So we thought we were ahead of the game, and then suddenly everybody else was everything online. So Sink into Great Writing is going to be October 3rd, the Saturday. And it's, you'll see the information in the next newsletter that comes out September 1st, or you'll start to, actually it's probably listed on our website already under the webinars page. You'll see the information there and you can register for go register for all the webinars. Come on, these are free. But Think into Great Writing is there as well. So I helped set that one up for Sherry because she did me a favor. And then we're gonna have probably 2 a year. So look for another one in the spring.
What was your time commitment? How much time do you spend?
I was about to say what you really asked. What you really asked was how many hours I spend on this, right?
Yep.
I really couldn't even begin to tell you. Some weeks it's like a full-time job, and then some weeks it's fine. It's easy. It's a couple hours here and there. It doesn't have to be that way, but I'm a little extra in all ways. So this is probably my fault. Also, Sisters is having like a really kind of a sea change year just by virtue of the things that we are dealing with, globally. But also it was the year that our executive director retired. She retired in April. So no matter what, it was going to be a huge year for Sisters, taking the organization out of the loving hands of someone who had been running it for 30 years and figuring out how to get all the work done. So we're still figuring out the mechanisms, trying to take as much day-to-day stuff off the board's hands and putting it in an administrative type situation. But we've got some great help. The National Board is fantastic. And so the new election will be in October, and most of the people will stay in their jobs. We have a couple people moving in, and they're just a great group of people. We just got a new board member last week to take over a job that was vacated mid-year. And the fact that we have someone who worked for, Macmillan Education Publishing for 20 years as the education liaison for the Sisters in Crime National Board, it blows my mind, all the skills and talents that, people who are members of the organization, they also write mysteries, right? But they have all this career experience that they're willing to share with sisters and to show us how to do things better and better. It's a really generous group of people. I mean, mystery, as you know, is a generous group of people. We're really lucky. That is not the case for every genre, and I won't name names since we're recording this. Although I didn't name the devil's name earlier, did I?
Nope,
Good.
you're safe.
Good. I gotta watch my mouth more. Let's see. Somebody's doing mystery flash fiction. 300-word limit. 300 words. Phoebe, oh my gosh, that's hard. Don't you think that the smaller stories are harder than?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, because I'm kind of a blabbermouth, so yes.
Me
That's
too.
hard
I
to.
am totally a blabbermouth. When I started writing, so I got told that short story was a novel, keep writing. And then I started to, I was like, what is this? What is this? Room to roam? Room to just explore and use whatever words I want? I mean, you edit down later, right? But I had been so used to writing short stories, being so economical. Every word, every phrase having to do 3 jobs. It was a revelation. I have taken to it greatly because I talk a lot, if you guys haven't noticed.
You're doing great. Thank you very much for coming. We really
Oh,
appreciate it.
thank you so much for having me. And if anybody comes up with a question that they forgot to ask or they wish they'd asked, I'm on social media, and my website has a contact page. Just let me know.
Yay. Thank you so
Thank you so
very
much. And
Yeah.
keep writing, guys. Again, that's the only thing we can control. It's the thing that'll make you feel so much better. Give it a shot. Write a few words.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Lori.
Good luck, Heart of Texas.
Thank you.
Wear those masks.
Yes. Oh my God, please. Say hello to the Austin City Limits for me if you get near it, okay?
All right.
Definitely.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.